Tim Blake was a runner and planner. On this Thursday evening, he sat on a bench under a tree across the street from a low-rise hotel in the city center. He was wearing black sweatpants, black sneakers, a black hooded sweatshirt, dark gloves, and a black KN95 mask, possibly fake. Tim was 39 years old, of average build. He had twin daughters, 16 years old, and a son, 15 years old. They were all at home that night. He was married to Monica, 37 years old. While he sat on the bench, Monica walked out the front door of the hotel and turned right towards the garage where her Camry was parked, while she spent some time inside. It was 9 o'clock in the evening. Tim followed her with his eyes and saw her car drive out of the garage. She drove past him. 2 minutes later, Donald Crenshaw Roman III left the hotel. He was 49 years old, a large man, well-dressed. What night? He was a partner in Monica's law firm. He was also a miser and a snake. His Lexus was not in the lighted garage. Instead, Crenshaw parked it in an alley next to the hotel, near a loading dock that was not in use at night. This way, he saved $8. Additionally, there was no record of him being near the hotel that night. But $8 was important to him. Crenshaw turned left from the hotel entrance, walked half a block, and turned into an alley. Tim stood up from the bench when he saw Crenshaw and easily ran across the street with both hands in the pocket of his sweatshirt. Crenshaw was reaching into his coat pocket for his keys when Tim caught up with him. Crenshaw was completely unaware that there was someone else next to him. Tim pulled a .22 caliber revolver from his sweatshirt. It was equipped with a homemade noise reduction device. Tim shot him. Crenshaw fell to the ground. Tim turned him over so they could talk. Crenshaw was alive and paralyzed. He looked at Tim. Tim lifted his KN95 mask and smiled at Crenshaw. He saw that Crenshaw recognized him. Tim was glad to see the pathetic fear on the man's face. Tim said, "You shouldn't have someone else's wife, especially mine. Time to pay." Crenshaw muttered something. Tim shot him. He checked for a pulse and found none. He then took Crenshaw's wallet and car keys. He picked up the body, it was just a body now, and loaded it into a dumpster next to the loading dock. Tim got into Crenshaw's car. He drove it across town and parked it on a certain sidewalk. 20 minutes later, a man approached him, took the keys from the front driver's wheel, and drove off. 3 hours later, the Lexus was no longer there. Spare parts in a large warehouse. Tim ran from the Lexus to his house, a few miles away. About halfway there, he stopped, took money out of his wallet, and put the wallet in the storm drain. 4 more blocks later, he did the same with a .22. It was an untraceable gun that he had had since he was a teenager. He grew up in a rough area. He hid the gun all this time, knowing that he might need it someday again. Monica was home when he returned from his Thursday evening run. He was about 5 minutes later than usual. The teenagers were upstairs in their rooms. Monica was in the kitchen. She shed her work clothes and put on a shirt and slippers. She looked the same as usual, very good. She asked, "How was your run?" "Very nice." Tim smiled at her. He noted that she had showered since returning home. Regular Thursday. He did the same, and they went to bed. She initiated sex. Tim pulled her towards him and fucked her hard. The next day, Monica came home from work in shock. "Tim, Don is dead. He is dead." She was crying. He was a jerk. Why cry? He looked at her intently. She turned pale, screamed, and fell to the floor. Tim looked down at her. He felt no compassion. Rather, he was very pleased. Serves her right. He watched as she straightened up, clutching the sofa. She was still crying. "What's happened, and why are you so upset? This guy was a complete asshole, and you said it yourself many times." She looked at him. Tears streamed down her face. She sobbed, You. She couldn't finish. "I what? Just tell me what happened." You evil bastard. Wow, what the heck? You need to calm down, Monica. I didn't do a damn thing to this guy, if that's what you say. The question is, why do you think I did it? He wasn't an asshole. He was nice. How do you know? Well, I think you just told me. You slept with him. Jesus, Monica. Because he was an asshole. What kind of person are you? I am not who you are. How could you? It was just a fling. Yes, and how many other affairs has he had? Why are you blaming me? He said all the right things, but with a slight smile on his face. That smile and stern look at the beginning allowed his errant wife to understand what had happened. You killed him, and they are going to arrest you. What will happen to the family when you end up in prison? I won't be arrested or put in jail. I guarantee. The main question is what will happen to the family now that I find out that you are an unfaithful cheater. I am not like that. It was an affair. It won't last long. You. How long has this been going on? I don't have to talk about it. I can understand that. Some time must have passed, otherwise you would have said, "Here it is. I think we need to get a divorce. I want this, I think. Maybe you too." I need to think. I mean, you say you didn't know, but I don't know. You smirk as you say this. An alarming grin. Confession. Nonsense. I'm glad the guy is dead, though. He should not have anyone's wife. People can be dangerous in these circumstances. Especially you. Please come in and move your things to the basement room. I won't sleep with you. You're moving. No, Monica. You cheated, so you pay the price. A small price, for now. Monica didn't want to sleep in the same room as Tim anyway. She grabbed enough things to stay the night and went downstairs. All three children quickly descended the stairs. Apparently, they were alarmed by the crying and arguing. Rita and Emma were delighted. Tim Jr. to a lesser extent. Rita said, "Dad, what's going on? We heard something. About divorce, affairs." "What?" "Here's the thing, kids. Your mother was unfaithful with her boss. And what's more, someone killed that man last night. That's all I know. She'll be sleeping on a cot in the basement for the foreseeable future." "God, Dad." It was the youngest. "Are you going to get a divorce?" "I don't know. I have very little information and no explanation. Now, we need to have dinner. Let's order a couple of pizzas." Emma took the phone. Which one should I order? She was a sensible girl and could always eat. 30 minutes later, the pizza was delivered. Large vegetarian and meat. While we waited, we talked a little. Everyone seemed thoughtful. Over pizza, they began to discuss what had happened. Tim said, "I want you all to know that no matter what happens between your mother and I will always support you. Please try not to get distracted or fail your grades. And also, don't talk about it at school. This problem should stay here for now." When? When will any decisions be made? Rita was clearly nervous and never ate much. Emma was still eating. "I can't tell. Who wants to take the pizza to Mom?" Emma raised her head. "There are 2 pieces left." She seemed disappointed. Rita said, "I'll go." She made a plate and took a bottle of water. Rita stayed downstairs for 10 minutes. When she returned, the others looked at her. "Mom said thank you for the pizza. She's not in very good condition." I hugged her. "She said to tell you all that she's sorry this happened." The younger sighed. "What part of what happened is she apologizing for?" The girls looked at him in horror. Tim said, "Please, Junior, she made mistakes, of course. But let's see what happens next. She still loves you all." After dessert, the children went to their rooms, probably to search the internet for news about the murder. Tim did the same. There was a big article about it in the local newspaper. It said that prominent local lawyer and conservative political activist Donald Crenshaw Roman III had been found shot to death in a dumpster in the alley behind the Elvers Hotel. Police said Crenshaw was robbed and his new Lexus was missing. Police have not explained why Crenshaw was in the alley. The investigation is ongoing. There was speculation online that Crenshaw was killed for political reasons, as he was a big Trump supporter. It was already past 9 o'clock when the doorbell rang. Tim looked at the camera and saw 2 plainclothes police officers, an elderly white man in a rumpled suit, and a tall, slender black man dressed to the nines. He opened the door. Tim said, "How can I help you?" The white detective said, "I'm Detective Stevens, and this is Detective Jackson. We'd like to talk to you and your wife." "About Crenshaw." "Yes." "Well, I can talk to you, but she's probably sleeping downstairs." He stepped back and two officers entered. He led them into the living room. Then he walked up to the stairs and said loudly, "Everyone go to your rooms now." The stamping of feet on the upper landing died down. "Sorry, detectives. 3 teenagers, already worried. I didn't want them to worry." Jackson said, "I guess it can't be avoided, sir. I'm doing what I can. What do you want to know?" "We would like to know where you were on Thursday evening." "I did my usual long run. After dinner, I run on Thursdays, some distance. I've been doing this for several years." Jackson asked, "Do you run after dinner?" "Well, 90 minutes or more after that. I go out at about 8:45 and come back after 10. "Where did you go?" "I ran along the path along the park towards the city, turned into Lansdale, through Marks Park, around the park and back through the city to the park path. It's one of several routes I have." "So you were in the vicinity of Elvers?" "No, well, nearby, about 8 blocks, on Sheridan." Stevens asked, "What are you wearing?" "Tracksuit. I think blue top, dark trousers." He said, "Mr. Blake, we have information that your wife, Monica, was having an affair with Mr. Crenshaw. Did you know about this?" "Until tonight, no. She was very upset about Crenshaw. Much more than I expected, since I was under the impression that she despised him. When she told me that he had been killed, I may not have been very tactful. She reacted strongly to this, and it turned out that she was having an affair, as she said, with him." "You didn't know until tonight?" "No." "Was she home when you went for a run?" "No." "When you returned?" "Yes." "She seemed out of it." "Not at all." "What happened then?" "She seemed to want sex, so we had sex. Then we slept." "I don't want to be intrusive, but was it unusual for her to have sex with you immediately after sex with Mr. Crenshaw?" "No, not every Thursday, but 3 times before that." "You weren't afraid?" "The first time. Not after that. The sex was great. I'm ashamed, but it's true, even for the first time. Now that I think about it, maybe Tim wasn't the one who initiated sex that night." Stevens asked, "Was the sex good the night Mr. Crenshaw was killed?" Stevens cleared his throat. "For now, Mrs. Blake, those are all the questions we have. We may need to talk to you later." Monica was still looking straight at Jackson. "Anytime." She said it softly, with a real smile, just for the detective. Then she got up and left the room. Stevens looked at Jackson. The recording was turned off. "What the hell, Ty?" "She turned me on. What about you?" "Not as much as you. Maybe you should go to the bathroom. You know you can't deal with her right now." "I know. Don't worry. I think I'll go to the bathroom after all." He got up and left. He passed a female officer on his way to the men's room. She noticed. She turned and watched as he walked through the door. She smiled, wondering what could have caused this. She decided to explore it later. Monica left the station. She was overcome with heat. She couldn't believe how her police interrogation went. This black detective wanted her badly. She thought that she shouldn't have provoked him, but she couldn't help herself. The questions made her think about sex with Tim after Donald. The best sex for her. She was honest with herself about this. She knew it was because she felt bad for giving herself to her husband after Donald. She was drawn again, now that she was on her way home. Tim was there. Children, perhaps not. She needed what she needed. She parked in the driveway and went to look for Tim in his lair. He was there. He looked stunned when she burst in. Monica said, "I need sex now. I don't care if we get divorced or not. I need it badly right now, and you're available." She quickly took off her clothes. Tim was amazed. They quickly had sex. She collapsed on top of him, both breathing heavily. They lay there for a while until they came to their senses. Monica rose above Tim. She gave him a really evil smile. He said, "You've worn me out, Monica. You didn't mind. Maybe I'll do it whenever I want." He said, "What's gotten into you?" "You're a fool," she laughed, and he couldn't help but join her. This time, after a few minutes, she looked at him and said, "Maybe now is a good time to talk about me and Donald." He could have pushed her away. But why? Her sexual attack erased his confidence that the marriage was over. "Why did you do that? We have great sex." "If you're wondering, he's never been as good as you. I was just excited about the idea of having a boss. Sorry I did that." "No, I don't think you're apologizing." "And what made you so excited after the police interrogation? Did they fuck you too?" She giggled. "No, but Detective Jackson was horny, and he wanted me badly. And I came here and used you to satisfy my passion. You did well. I won't touch him if you continue." "You're crazy," she said. "Timmy, I love you and no one else. It was a mistake on my part to get lost with Donald. On the other hand, when I came home after he had sex, we had fantastic sex. You know that too. You promise not to do it again." "I won't do this to Donald." She laughed, or rather giggled. "I mean cheat with someone else." "I can't promise that. I can try. I'll tell you that if I want another man and I'm going to fuck him, I won't hide." Tim was like most other men, with one exception. There was a small part of him that acted as a neutral observer. She was always there. She was quite critical. He was aware of this part. He called her Uber Team. Uber for short. Uber was there during, and especially after, sex with Monica. It was that small part of Tim that caused Crenshaw's death. There was no forgiveness in the Uber Team. It was as if time were two different people. When he was happy and relaxed, he was harmless. But when bad things happened to him, he had anger problems. Uber was there to channel these problems. Uber Team put plans for Monica on hold, waiting to see how much, if any, she would be hurt. But the anger was there. Monica let Tim go after that. She went to the bathroom to urinate and clean herself up. She used his shirt for this. She will wash it for him tomorrow. She was happy with afternoon sex with Tim. She conquered him in his own lair. This thought excited her again. She used his shower. When she came out, Tim was naked on the bed. He wasn't excited. She had no doubt that she could turn him on again, even after everything that had happened earlier. But she didn't. She was not a cruel woman. But now she was hypersexual, more than ever before. As she walked back to the main house, her thoughts turned to Detective Jackson. She has never slept with a black man. She thought it might have to wait until after the investigation, but she knew she could have him and she wanted it. Maybe it was worth the risk. Maybe not. She loved her children and Tim too. She needed to think about what was causing her new approach to sex. She thought back to the last few months since she first slept with Donald. Sex with Donald was good. Not as good as the sex she had with Tim when she had just returned from Donald's bed, and certainly not as good as what just happened in his office. Considering everything as a whole, the conclusion was clear. She was getting aroused by dominating Tim, pinning him to the bed and practically raping him. She thought Tim also got excited when he was dominated and used. In fact, she was sure of it. She thought about her whole situation. Tim could have killed Donald. If he did this, he must have had a lot of anger. Caution was needed in communicating with him, especially if she was going to dominate him. If he can't handle it, there is one solution that will solve his dilemma, not the one she likes. Tim was stunned and worried about what happened, mainly by his own helplessness in the face of Monica's sexual attack. He began to fear that she would be able to do this to him whenever she wanted. Just the thought of it made him horny again, but it also made him deeply angry. She tried to negotiate a way out of the consequences of her affair. He had always known that he liked her gentle form of dominance. He remembered the sex they'd had a few Thursday nights after he'd run and she'd had sex. There was no doubt that she was hot, hot and getting the best of him back then. He got up and took a shower. Tim stayed in his office because he was afraid of another confrontation with his wife. Another confrontation where she would make him feel like a little boy. After some time, he began to plan life after Monica. If she kept pushing all his buttons like she was doing, he was going to have to do something. He couldn't live under her thumb, especially after Donald. He knew Uber would turn on him if he did this. He wasn't sure what would happen if Uber turned on him. If Uber kills him, Uber will die too. Mystery. But Tim knew a few things. First of all, he couldn't just make Monica disappear now, because the attention of the police would be his undoing. And then there were children. Secondly, Monica was so excited about her success today that she would probably seduce another guy. She liked perhaps a policeman. In the end, he will kill her, and probably in such a way that he will be imprisoned. And children. He thought about this for a long time. Then he returned to the main house. Monica was there, and the kids were gone. She was in the kitchen, wearing a short dress and flip-flops. Her hair was wet and looked darker than usual. She smiled at him as he entered. It was a knowing smile. She knew Tim wanted her right now. She licked her lips slowly. Tim came into the kitchen with a plan. Looking at her, he hesitated. But he continued. "You are playing a very, very dangerous game. I have a weakness, I know it, and you know it." "Tim, maybe it's not a weakness. Maybe it's fun. I'll try to be careful, so I don't embarrass you in front of everyone we know." "I appreciate it. But I'm not only weak, I'm explosive and angry. And you might find out about that someday." She thought about it. "You could blow up, you mean? Hurt me. Hurt my other man. But those are two different things. I'm not saying that right. You could fly off the handle and kill me in a rush. Or you could plan and plot, like with Donald. I do not. Okay, let's leave it at that. But I know you and your abilities. Monica, can't we go back to what we had before?" She sat down and thought about it some more. She looked at him with an excited, stern look. "Please, Monica, we have children. I'm sure this will keep you in line, Timmy." "Yes, if I'm being rational. If you think I killed your lover, why are you doing this?" "It turns me on. I feel so strong when some detective can't stay in the same room with me without getting turned on. And I felt so strong when I took you like I just did. It's adrenaline. I've never been able to play with men like that before. Or maybe I could, but I didn't know how. But now I know how." She sat on a high stool, her legs crossed at the ankles, swaying. She kicked one of her slippers to the floor. She looked at Tim. "Tim, please put the slipper back on my foot." She said it softly, then pointed to her leg. Tim was wearing sports shorts and a t-shirt. When she kicked off her shoes and made her request, he immediately became aroused. She saw this, and her smile grew a little wider. "Now, Tim." Tim slowly knelt down in front of her. They maintained eye contact the entire time. He looked to find shoes. He took her foot in his hands and put on the slipper. Then he looked into her eyes again. She whispered, "Thank you, Tim. Take off your clothes now." Then they had sex. Monica said in a businesslike voice, "Get out now and get dressed." She went into the living room. The doorbell rang. Monica looked at the camera by the door and saw two detectives. There was a young woman with them. She opened the door. She heard Tim run upstairs. Monica said, "Hello, detectives. Who is your date?" Jackson said, "She's a technician, Anne. We have a court order for DNA samples from you and your husband. It won't take long, just a mouth swab." Monica looked at him. "Okay, come in." She walked away and turned towards the stairs. She shouted, "Tim, come down. The police are here." Tim showed up, wearing shorts and a sweatshirt. Detective Jackson turned to Tim, looking only at him. He explained that they had a court order for DNA, a mouth swab. Tim nodded, and the young woman, an attractive Asian, swabbed the inside of his cheek. She then did the same to Monica. She sealed the smears in plastic. Stephen said, Thank you. We look forward to getting a match with you, Mrs. Blake. She looked at Jackson, who was busy sealing the swabs. Detective Jackson, will I get a report on any DNA matches? He looked at her. She smiled. Tim glanced at the equipment. She looked annoyed. Jackson stuttered, Aye, Mrs. Blake, I don't. You will not be notified. Police business. He slowly backed away from her. Then he stopped, looked straight into her eyes. Something had definitely changed in his behavior. He said, Mrs. Blake, I will say that there will definitely be a match because you had sex with him minutes before he died. We are not interested in your DNA. She said, Oh, I see. But, Detective Jackson, I'm sure I have Timmy's DNA, even right now. Well, especially now, but probably all the time. At least partially. This little phrase, especially now, caused a pause. Monica played with Jackson. Tim could see Jackson's discomfort. He smiled back at her. The Asian technique coughed slightly. Tim glanced at her, but she was looking at Jackson. He thought Jackson might get in trouble because of her. Tim was also aware of his own reaction, that he was getting horny again. Stevens was wearing baggy pants. Tim couldn't tell what was wrong with him. All Monica was wearing was a dress. Tim knew this. She made a subtle movement, and her chest swayed slightly. Jackson stared at it. He looked from her chest to her face and back, without hiding it at all. Then he said, Mrs. Blake, I think you two are very dangerous, and I don't know which of you is more dangerous. Monica grinned, looked down, and said, Left, I think. Jackson turned and headed towards the door. Stevens followed him. The technician paused for a moment, looking at Monica. She said, Leave him alone. Monica replied, I don't promise, dear. Raise your level. Protect yours. The woman left, slamming the door. Ann Burton was half Asian. Her father, but she had her mother's Irish character. She caught up with Jackson and said, Damn you, Ty. I was right there, but you still hit on her. Bastard. He said, Anne, I had to do something. She has some kind of power over me. I was afraid of her and you being there. But I decided to answer and see what she would do. I don't understand. She's just a middle-aged mom. Stephen said, She's more than that, Anne. Much more. Ty, she's playing with him, especially since she realized you're his friend. They got into the car and drove away. Monica and Tim looked at the closed door. Tim said, You need to loosen your grip. You're drunk on power. I want you to remember what I said about consequences. We have children. They might actually be orphans. I don't believe you would hurt me, Tim, because of them. I might snap, or I might just decide to intervene. Tim, did you feel better after you killed Don? I didn't kill him, but since he died, my life has gotten a lot more interesting. Not necessarily better. You're still a bitch, and I'm mad that you slept with that asshole. Really mad. He said this last in an even voice. She said, Timmy, do you think Jackson was right when he called us both dangerous? Yes. Which of us is more dangerous? He thought for a moment. It's symbiotic. So if we split up, we won't be dangerous individually? Not as dangerous. I'll still be dangerous, but I won't have you to egg me on. Bitch. Ooh, Timmy is getting impatient. Come upstairs with me, and I'll show you who's dangerous. She beckoned him with her finger, going upstairs, swaying her buttocks. Tim followed her like a puppy, with his head down. It was humiliating, and he realized he liked it. She also knew that Uber would intervene at some point. It was unpredictable when and how exactly. When he killed Crenshaw, Uber held him back the night he was discovered. The anger was directed towards a deadly plan. The energy from his anger allowed him to carry out his plan without fear, calm. Celebration as he looked at the idiot who was about to die. All these thoughts flashed through his mind as he obediently followed Monica upstairs. They went downstairs. The doorbell rang again. Looking at the camera, they saw Anne, an Asian techie. She was alone. Monica said, Stay, boy. She went to open the door. Tim was terrified. He quickly ran into the dining room as Monica let Anne into the living room. She noticed that Tim was not there. She screamed, "Timmy, come out here now." Tim crawled out into the living room. Anne looked at him with her mouth open. She looked at Monica. "What are you? Is he yours?" "Yes." "My God." Monica said, "Roll over, Timmy." Timmy obeyed her. "Sit." He sat down. Monica asked Anne, "Did you want something?" Anne said, "I came to warn you to stay away from Ty. He's mine." "No. Well, Timmy is mine. Ty is not yours like that." Anne looked at Tim, who was sitting like a pet. Despite her resentment towards Monica over Jackson, she was turned on by Tim's obedience. She said, "He has a good build. Why are you after Ty?" "I've never had a black one. Is he big?" Anne smiled. "Do you trust me to tell the truth? It's not as big as your pet's." Monica said, "I can trade you, Tim for Ty, just for one night. What do you say?" "No way. Ty is more than just a sex object to me. I love him. You can have him." "Well, I'll give you Timmy anyway. You can take him upstairs for an hour. He'll obey you. I promise. My kids will be home soon, so you can't stay the night." She decided to agree. "Fine." Monica said, "Go with Anne, boy. Do what she says." Anne went upstairs. Tim followed her. When they got up, Tim led her into the master bedroom. Anne closed the door. Anne looked at Tim. She said, "I don't want a slave. I want you to treat me like a man." Then they had sex. She said, "Thank you. It was wonderful. The sensations were amazing. Why did your wife, or rather mistress, give you to me?" "I don't know. It started recently, after her boyfriend was killed. I don't know what's on her mind. But, without a doubt, I like it when she owns me. You looked so embarrassed when she made you do tricks for me." "I was. I think it's a turn on. Humiliation. Damn. You have children, and she won't let them know about this. We better get dressed. At least I have an alternate DNA sample now." She giggled. "It may have been new, but it was the best sex I've had in a long time. We can do it again." They got dressed and went downstairs. Almost all the time allotted to them has passed. Monica said, "Did you like it, Anne?" "Yes, of course. He's so big and strong. Can I have him again?" "Maybe. How long have you been sleeping with Ty?" "6 months. He's a good guy. Please don't hurt him." "Why not? Did I just give you my pet husband?" "Ty's a good man. I'm not so sure about Tim here. He's better in bed than Ty anyway." "Maybe for you, but I'm interested in trying a black man. He's like that. There are many of those." At that moment, the garage door opened and the car with the twins drove inside. Tim quickly ran upstairs. Monica released Anne, and normal family life resumed. Tim and Monica talked in bed that night. Tim said, "Monica, we can't let kids know about our kinks." "I know, Tim. Either way, they're mad at me now. If they find out I made you a slave, God knows what they'll do. But I expect you to try to calm them down." "How? I mean, they know you cheated." "Just be nice to me when they're around." "This whole situation is really fucking messed up. I liked it. You let me sleep with Anne. Maybe you were trying to do something in revenge. Maybe Anne seems attracted to you. Maybe. But Monica, I'm warning you, if you want other guys, cops or not, I can't promise that we'll survive as a family, you know. In fact, I promise you that big, bad changes will happen. Promise, I'll tell you." This silenced Monica. She's been having fun these past few weeks. But Tim's last statement made her flinch. She said, "Maybe I went too far. You are my husband, but I like your obedience. I think it will end. Well, maybe only when we're in this room." "Monica, there are different ways to solve this problem. Different ways." He squeezed her hand. Monica shuddered again. She loved Tim, but she was just as afraid of him. They fell asleep, and when they woke up, it was as if life had resumed, with Monica's betrayal looming over the morning. They woke up on Saturday morning. Tim went to prepare breakfast, making oatmeal and sausage. The twins came down early because they were going to go hunting for guys. Junior was nowhere to be seen. Rita wanted to know, "Are you going to get a divorce?" "Probably not. I can't say for sure. Remember, if we go our separate ways, I will still be there for you." Emma said, "Yes, but not that much, maybe." "Of course it could be different. Tell me, will you forgive me?" This question quickly stopped the conversation, but they thought about it. "Why did she do that, Dad?" Emma asked this question seriously. She overcame it. Rita said, "Whatever that means. It means she was turned on by having guilty secrets." "Sick. It hurts. I wouldn't have stayed then." Emma seemed sad. "We'll just have to see what happens next." Rita said, "Maybe you're wrong about the reason." "Maybe, but I don't think so." Monica appeared on the stairs. "Good morning." She seemed depressed. Both girls got up from their half-empty breakfasts and walked out of the kitchen. Monica was shocked to the core. "What did you tell them? They hate me." "They wanted to know why you did it. I told them it was for the pleasure of overcoming it." "Oh shit, Tim. I mean, that's what you said, right? Mediocre sex. But it was exciting, risking it." "But you make it sound so corny." "It was like that. You were bored and cheated for the sake of excitement, mostly because you had a guilty secret from me." "You're going to. Oh, Tim, please, you know you want me to stay, to do to you what I did." The shower started running upstairs. They both looked up. Junior never took long showers. Monica said, "Too much has happened in a short time. It's overwhelming. It is for me, and I'm sure it is for you too. We need some time to cool down." "Okay, but no more playing with your pet." "You love it." She smiled at him. The shower turned off. "Monica, if you do this during the so-called cooling-off period, I will leave right now. This is part of what I have to consider." "How long will it take to cool down?" "A week, at least. I won't kill anyone until next Saturday." Monica laughed. "Well, I tried to laugh. It was more of a choking cough." Junior appeared. "Who didn't finish their sausage?" Tim said, "Your sisters. You can take them, and there's more in there." Monica looked at her son. "You should eat your oatmeal too." He looked at her and said nothing. Monica waited, but then left the kitchen and went upstairs. The shower came back on shortly after. Tim said, "Have you all decided to freeze her?" "Dad, it wasn't hard. Bye. She ruined everything." Junior finished all the sausage, but not the oatmeal. He usually liked oatmeal. Tim saw this as a passive-aggressive maneuver. "I'll go to Joseph. Study." "Of course. Please be back for dinner." He left. Joseph had a pretty sister, 1 year older. Tim thought Junior was interested in her. Monica came down a few minutes later. She noticed the untouched oatmeal. She took some, frowning. She was wearing a sleeveless loose dress and looked very good, even with a frown. The frown didn't extend below her neck, and those were the parts that looked best. "They all hate me, Tim." She started crying. Tim thought that served her right. "They'll go back to something similar to what you had before. Maybe not exactly the same. It all depends on what happens to us. I don't know what to do around them. With you, I can. Well, you know. But I can't do that with them. You have to help me with them. You can influence them to come back to me. But I think that they also need time to cool down. Right now, they are very angry with you and think that you betrayed the family. Which, by the way, you did. Maybe after some time, they will need you as a mother more than they want to hate you. Simple, okay? Please, while we're in our cooling-off phase, don't be rude to me in front of them." I'll talk to them tonight, without you around. Maybe we can go for a walk after dinner." "Okay, can I have a kiss? Somewhere, she patted her butt. Please don't, Monica. Don't make me do something I don't want to do. Life in the house the next week was filled with tension, but without flare-ups. Monica did not force Tim to crawl, although she was tempted to do so several times. She was still sleeping in the basement. If she slept with him, she would probably put him in his place. Maybe it was better this way, she thought, that she was in the basement. But sooner or later, she was going to put Tim in the doghouse. Detectives held a conference on the case. They spent a week exploring various possible motives. The most obvious was simple robbery. The guy made himself look like a piñata. The police had some informants in the area and homicide asked for help, but none of the locals could help. Another possibility was a political reason. Crenshaw was a thorn in the side of local politicians and donated money to righteous causes. Rumors circulated that he was also involved with white supremacist groups, at least financially. But Jackson and Stevens ultimately couldn't understand how it could lead to such a neat murder like this. The last possibility was a jealous husband. As far as they could find out, there were three possible options. Crenshaw slept with the wife of one of his partners in the firm, a trophy wife. However, the guy was out of town at a conference when the murder happened. He could have hired a hit man, although it was difficult to understand how he could know a way to do this. Crenshaw also slept with his neighbor's wife quite often. The wife was Ellen Brandt, married to Victor. Victor was the owner of several bars in the city. As it turned out, he was in one of them, 5 miles from Elvers, when the murder occurred. Confirmed by video and witnesses, he, too, could have hired a killer, and he probably could do it. However, an interview with the Brandt couple established that they had an open marriage, and Victor knew about Crenshaw and even observed him on several occasions. Of course, there were still wives. They might have been jealous of Crenshaw's new mistress. Neither had an alibi, but none of the detectives suspected them of the crime. Tim remained. They both concluded that Tim was the most likely option, about 50-50 with robbery. They decided to bring Tim to the station and subject him to the most intense interrogation possible under the law. 2 detectives arrived at 1 o'clock on Friday afternoon while Tim was working in his office in the backyard. He saw that they were at the front door through the door camera. He activated the speaker and told them to go around the back of the house. He met them at the door to the garage office. "What happened, detectives?" "We need you to come with us to the station for a conversation." "What now?" "No, I'm very busy right now and will be all day and tomorrow morning. I have a deadline." Jackson said, "You can put it aside. This is a murder case." Tim smiled at him. "Order." This was met with silence. Tim said, "How about Monday, if you're working then?" They were not happy with this agreement. They hoped to get Tim without a lawyer. Now he will have the opportunity to hire a lawyer. But he didn't. On Monday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Tim walked into the police station and asked for Jackson or Stevens. He was put in an interrogation room with a camera in the corner. There was a table and 3 uncomfortable chairs. Detectives left him in the room for an hour. The door was locked. Tim took out his phone and was reading an e-book. Jackson and Stevens were disappointed by Tim's apparent lack of stress as they watched him in the room. Finally, Jackson could stand it no longer and signaled for Stevens to accompany him. Jackson began by assuring Tim that he was not in custody and that this was just a recorded interview rather than a formal statement. Tim smiled at him. "I notice that the door has been locked the entire hour I've been here." Stevens said, "Sorry, those are the rules." Tim asked, "What do you want to know?" Both police officers questioned him in detail about his jogging route that day. His story was no different from what he offered in the first interview. Jackson then said, "We have received video from various locations along this route. We believe that you were inaccurate with us. You may have lied." Tim was very, very careful when he planned the attack to scout cameras along the various possible routes. The route he laid out to police did not have cameras in places that could refute his story. He knew it. So he just shrugged at the accusation if it was an accusation. He said, I ran where I ran and did what I said. That's all. Jackson was disappointed. They had doorbell camera videos from neighboring areas where Tim was a couple of miles from his home. But nothing they received showed anything that contradicted what Time claimed. Tim knew that the car ride made up for the time he spent surveilling the hotel and killing Crenshaw, so his times through neighboring areas would be okay with expectations. Stevens took over the discussion. He carefully asked about Tim's connections to anyone who worked at the Crenshaw law firm. Tim didn't really have any connections to anyone there. Of course, he attended social events with his wife, but he was never friendly with anyone he met there. Tim's friends were from his old neighborhood, or were parents of children the same age as him. He had old school friends and siblings. He knew they were trying to prove that he could have found out about the betrayal in time to commit the murder. He knew they had nothing because his knowledge was pure chance. Both detectives took a break and suggested Tim freshen up. He took the water. They were gone for 30 minutes. Both were disappointed. The trick of making a false video claim didn't work, and they had no way to prove that Tim knew about Monica and Crenshaw's affair, so not a single provable motive. They came back and asked Tim about the gun. He told them he had a skeet gun. That's all. The interrogation has exhausted itself. Detectives considered the possibility of harsh treatment against Tim, but they had nothing to use for this, and Tim didn't seem like someone who would be intimidated by these tactics. They sent him home. He got home at 6:30 and Monica was gone. The children were at home. He was told that she called saying she would be late due to a work emergency. Tim called her work phone, but it went to voicemail. He called her cell phone and she answered. She said she was in a conference room with several others. Tim asked if she would be home for dinner, and she said she probably wouldn't. Tim then looked at the data from the GPS device he installed on her car. The car was in a work parking lot. He was almost sure she wasn't lying. Of course, she could have sex on the conference table, but he thought not. Too soon after her disaster. She was disliked at work because of her affair with Crenshaw. Tim didn't expect her to start a new romance so soon. Tim considered his reaction to Monica's work schedule. He didn't like what he had come to, which was that if he stayed with her, he would always have to test her, because he definitely didn't trust her and never would. Realizing this, Tim came to the conclusion that their marriage, at least in its previous form, was over. Junior had 2 years left before graduating from high school. Tim considered staying until then. He also thought about the possibility of an open marriage. He put the question aside in his mind, awaiting further information. In the meantime, one of the things he did was start a little surveillance on Detective Jackson. Nothing serious, very casual. Sometimes he ran past Jackson's house, about 7 miles from his own. He inquired about his work schedule, which, oddly enough, did not include shift work. Jackson and Stevens started work at 8 in the morning and usually left at 5:30, unless there was an intensive investigation. Jackson owned a gym and loved to run back and forth. He spent 1 or 2 nights a week with Anne, as well as Saturday night. Besides her, he had no other women in the house. Tim believed that Jackson believed in their exclusive relationship. Poor guy. After interviewing Tim, Jackson and Stevens had a meeting with their 2 bosses. It was a big deal and management was impatient. The 4 men and the boss, Thelma Weston, discussed the work done in detail. No one could find fault with the investigation. Normally, if it was just an ordinary person who was killed, the case would be put on hold. But not this. Wild theories about conspiracies against conservative donors have surfaced online. One media mogul took up the case and used it as an example of how the big blue city police were incompetent or corrupt. Jackson and Stevens were honest cops. They were under enormous pressure in this matter. They both believed Tim did it, and both believed they would never have enough evidence to make an arrest, let alone enough evidence to convict them. Stevens' ulcer worsened. He had to take medical leave. Chief Weston and Homicide Chief Jerry Thornton decided to bring fresh eyes to the case when Stevens went down. 3 weeks have passed since the beginning of the investigation, and they have reached a dead end. They assigned Hiram Gordon and his partner Digby O'Donnell to the case. These were high-profile homicide detectives with good media connections. Gordon was a light-skinned black man who liked to wear pastel-colored three-piece suits and sandals, except in winter. O'Donnell came from a long line of Irish-American cops, and he made it to homicide, which was quite an achievement. He was large and physically imposing. Jackson was still on the case, but he was essentially upstaged by two super cops. He wasn't unhappy about it. He worked his 40 hours and watched two super detectives do their jobs. Meanwhile, after the interview with Tim, Monica pulled herself together. Despite his misgivings, Tim was delighted. He had no way to fight Monica. He belonged to her. It could have killed him in the end. It could have killed her too. But that's how it was. Life at home continued with Monica and Tim keeping their kinks behind closed doors. Meanwhile, Jackson and Ann lived together in his house. Then some guy was arrested for Crenshaw's murder. Not Tim. A black guy, 23 years old, Eddie James. A large press conference was held where Chief Weston and Detective Gordon stated that they believed James came upon Crenshaw in an alley, shot him during a carjacking, and stole the car. James was arraigned the next day and held without bail. Tim read about all of this. He decided to investigate. He learned that James was a violent bully who had so far escaped all but the mildest of punishments. He was charged with murder at age 15 and won the case. The case was closed when a key witness was killed in a drive-by shooting. Tim decided to talk to Jackson about the arrest. He went for a run past Jackson's house at a time when he thought Jackson would also be outside. He caught up with him about a mile from the house and ran up to him. Tim said, out of breath, "I see you're okay." Jackson winced. He looked at Tim. "What happened, Tim? Do you feel guilty?" "No, but I was wondering about this James guy. Is he really guilty?" "No. Well, Gordon says they have a ballistic match. When he was arrested, they found a gun on him, and they say it was the murder weapon. I doubt it, though. You know what I think." "Whatever. I mean, how could they get a match like that if he didn't do it?" I never said that. They falsified the evidence. I believe that the pressure became too much for them. Gordon is smart." "Did James actually kill the people he was accused of killing?" "No doubt. Plus at least 3 others. Even Gordon wouldn't frame a decent man. Well, maybe, but he and his partner wouldn't have a problem putting this guy away for life. Neither would I, if for that matter." "I think that's it. Come by sometime. We can grill something." "Yes, of course. You know, I'm sure about the matter. You killed him. Maybe for a good reason. But still, you're more slick than Gordon, and a lot more slick than me. I don't know if I can be your friend." "Suppose I did it." "I didn't, but I see that you are sure. Why is it so important?" "I believe people should be held accountable for their actions, or at least pay for what they did wrong. And regardless of the fact that Crenshaw was an asshole, he didn't deserve to die for it. He went out of his way to have other men's wives. I have no sympathy for him. At all. Suppose I confessed. James would have been released. Who is more likely to hurt someone, me or him?" "I understand, but no grill." "Okay." Tim ran further away from Jackson. Jackson remained silent about his suspicions about the ballistic evidence. He didn't see the point in blowing this issue out of proportion, and Gordon alone could not have pulled off any kind of fraud. There were many ways to accomplish this task, but all of them would require the participation of others. Such a plot would have shaken the entire department and killed the police's already shaky public support. Eddie James received a free public defender and received an excellent defense. But 18 months after his arrest, he was convicted of murder in a carjacking. He received life without the possibility of parole. It was the ballistics evidence that helped the prosecution win the case, despite weak evidence with no witnesses and 2 prison informants who said James had confessed. During those 18 months, Tim and Monica lived a typical suburban life, except for what happened behind closed doors. She didn't always dominate and humiliate him. It wasn't until sex life started to get a little boring. She just suddenly started doing it. In truth, he had been waiting for this. Being her slave pit for a few days renewed him, and her too. The girls had left for college, and Junior was going to the same university U. Studying at regular universities was cheaper, but the two of them will become empty nesters at the end of August. Tim shuddered at the thought of what his life might be like without children in the house to keep Monica at bay. Sometimes he shuddered on the good side. Monica did well at the law firm and transitioned from commercial litigation to tax law. The move meant she had more regular work hours. Tim didn't see any evidence that she was cheating. In September, Monica upped the ante. Her dominance games weren't necessarily limited to the bedroom. He had to cook dinner naked, then serve it alone at the table. No matter how hard he tried, he was always turned on when she did this to him. Tim was always excited, but Uber was starting to get more and more irritated. After Thanksgiving, when all the kids and parents were in the house for turkey, Monica wanted to go dancing. She and Tim went to a club that played live music on weekends. They sat at a table for two and danced several times, both fast and slow dances. When the group took a break, Tim went to get drinks. The bar was crowded, and when he returned, there was a guy sitting in his place talking to Monica. As Tim set down the drinks, the band started playing again. The guy stood up and asked Monica to dance. She agreed, smiling a wicked smile at Tim. The guy was tall and dark-haired, with a slender build. He looked strong. He was also a good dancer. He and Monica danced 3 songs, including one slow third. While they were dancing slowly, the guy's hands wandered over Monica's body. She didn't resist. Tim was about to get up and deal with him or try to. But the song ended and the dancers returned to the table. Tim looked at them. "Would you like to introduce me to your friend, Monica?" "Tim, this is Guy. He's in town for a convention. Isn't he a great dancer?" It seems he allowed himself too much. Tim's voice was level, and he was looking straight at Guy. Monica instantly became concerned. She knew Tim and knew that tone from him. She tried to calm Tim down by standing between the two men. But Guy said, "This woman was not disliked, but what I did, so fuck off." Tim smiled at him. Monica said, "Timmy, no." Tim said, "She's my wife. Go away." Guy stood over Tim. He felt like he had an advantage because he towered over him. Guy placed his hand on Tim's forehead and pushed him hard against the wall behind them. This was his big mistake. Tim instantly jumped up and, being shorter, hit Guy hard. It was a direct and very strong blow, and Guy fell to the floor. Security appeared instantly. One guard stood between Tim and Guy. Another guard checked Guy's condition. Tim simply sat back down in his seat. He barely managed to get up. The guard's name was Chuck on his chest. Chuck turned to Tim. "What did you do to that guy? I was watching, and I didn't see anything." Tim said, "He pushed me against the wall. I hit him, just once." Chuck fell silent. "I saw him push you. Maybe you should leave. He seemed hurt. You can come back later, and we'll cover the drinks." Tim left Chuck his name and phone number. Then he and Monica left. In the car, Monica said, "Well, it was a short evening of dancing." "It's not my fault, Monica. You provoked me with that dance. You know that. But he should have just left." Monica smiled at Tim. "You're so amazing to people, Tim. Much more dangerous and violent than anyone expects. That's what I really like about you, I think." "Why did you provoke me? Because if you want to keep going out, you'll have to stop it. I don't mind if you dance with other guys. I don't mind if you let them touch you." "Okay, I'll act like a decent wife, even if I'm not." When they returned home, they had sex like animals. They didn't make it to the bedroom for an hour, and when they got there, they didn't stop. Friday nights with dancing have become a tradition for them. They both loved to dance and were good at it. About 3 months after their first fight, they were at a club playing soul music and oldies. Monica noticed Ty Jackson and Ann. They had just entered the club at about 10 o'clock in the evening. Monica waved to them, and they walked up to the table. Tim didn't like it very much, but there were 2 empty seats, and the place was getting crowded, so they became 4. We ordered more drinks, and Ty Jackson asked Monica to dance. Tim and Ann stayed talking. Tim said, "Are you a couple now?" Ann held out her hand, which had a wedding ring on it. "I hope so. If Monica allows." "Don't be so sure she can have him. Either way, I bet I can have you." Ann smiled. "Maybe. Let's dance." So they went to dance. Ann was a good dancer. She and Tim started a slightly raunchy dance on the 3rd number. They both enjoyed it, though. Tim didn't see Monica or Ty. He remembered Ann's great body, and when a slow song started playing, he pulled her close to him. When the song ended, they returned to the table. Monica and Ty were nowhere to be seen. Tim said, "Let's go look for them. You know what they're probably doing. It's time to be a man." So they began to walk around the room and ended up on the back balcony. From there, they saw Ty pinning Monica against a tree and kissing her passionately. Tim said to Ann, "Should we stop them? Because I have a different answer." Ann pushed him against the wall and began to attack him, kissing him. They came to their senses a little. When they started looking for their partners again, they saw Ty holding Monica against a tree. They had sex. Tim and Ann watched. Ty put her down. Tim stood on the balcony and began to applaud. "Bravo! Bravo!" Tim shouted. Ty buttoned his pants and looked around. He saw Ann. Monica lowered her head and did not look at anyone. Tim shouted, "Get back inside." All 4 met at their table, which was empty, but the drinks had not yet been cleared away. They all sat down. Ty said, "Ann, I'm sorry. She has control over me. I just damn." Ann said, "Ty, I understand that. I'm the same way with Tim. I'd let him take me if he wanted. I'm still ready." She looked Tim straight in the eye when she said it. Tim looked at Ty. He said, "Perhaps we're even. I don't know. You just took my wife and didn't ask. Not very polite. However, Ann is a great pleasure giver. You're lucky." Ty was confused. Monica was not at a loss. She said, "We should all go to our house and figure this out. I'm so sure we'll all have a great time." Tim stood up and said, "I'll take Ann. Ty can take Monica. As many times as he wants, I guess." When the 4 reached the house, Monica let them in. She didn't waste any time. She said, "You guys go to the guest room. Ty and I will be in our bedroom." Tim looked at Ty. He said, "I don't want any reproaches after I sleep with your girlfriend. It works both ways, right?" Ty nodded. Monica dragged him upstairs before he changed his mind. She had fun at the club, but not that much. She wanted the full experience with the black man. Tim smiled at Ann. He picked her up and carried her upstairs. It wasn't easy. It was a wild night. They heard Tim and Ann downstairs and smelled bacon. Monica put on a robe and gave Ty one of Tim's robes. Tim cooked while Ann read the newspaper. The coffee was ready. Tim made toast for Monica and Ty. He was wearing loose gym shorts. Ann put on a short dress that belonged to one of the girls. Tim served breakfast and sat down to eat. No one said much, but cautious glances were exchanged. Ty hadn't forgotten what time was capable of when he got angry. Finally, Tim broke the silence. "I think Ann and I had a good time. I hope well." Monica said, "We all had a good time, just like I said." Tim smiled. "You're predictive, but maybe it wasn't so hard to predict." Ty said, "Now what?" Monica thought about it. She thought she knew what happened between Tim and Ann. She knew Tim wouldn't allow himself to be openly humiliated in front of Ty, much less submit to Ty. She said, "Maybe you two can go to Ty and Ann's, do what's natural, and Ty and I will stay here. Meet here on Sunday for lunch." Ann was all for it. She and Tim showered and got dressed without much sex. Tim took Ann for a walk along a nearby trail. He loved looking at her strong, sexy ass and thighs as he walked behind her. When they got to the top of the trail, they stopped and ate the sandwiches Tim had made. And they talked. They discovered that they had a lot in common. They both read the same books, detective stories, and thrillers. They loved the same music, country rock, and old hits. They both played similar video games. Anne enjoyed hiking and running, as did Tim. She also did weightlifting. She smiled at Tim. "Maybe I'll pick you up and carry you to bed like you did to me." Tim, already excited by the thought, said, "Whatever you say, Anne." Anne liked the sound of it. Tim was 10 years older than her. She was 32 and wanted children. So did Ty, he said. Ty was 2 years older. He transferred from the homicide department and worked on financial crimes in the new department. It was strictly a 9-to-5 job, and Anne loved it. But Timo. She stood up and, using her commanding tone, said, "Come with me now, stud." Tim loves it and obediently follows her. They made it to her house and had sex for the rest of the day. Tim took her to dinner and danced. They had a great time. Sometimes when they slow danced, Anne would tease Tim by whispering in his ear what she would make him do when they got home. Saturday night was just as exciting as Friday night. Meanwhile, at Monica's house, Ty was the master and Monica was the slave. Eventually Sunday arrived and Tim and Anne returned. Tim fried burgers and sausages and made a tomato and avocado salad. He and Ty drank beer and the women drank red wine. Again, Tim raised a pressing issue. "So, is everyone happy? Raise your hand if not." Nobody raised their hand. "Okay. I was a little worried that things might go wrong." Ty said, "I had a great time. I mean Monica, she's great." Tim said, "And too. But we all need to think about how to move forward." Monica said, "Now we can eat ice cream and maybe go to our partners." Anne smiled, "Sounds good." When Ty and Anne left, after 9, Monica and Tim went straight to bed naked, at Monica's insistence. She said, "I think I need my slave back." Tim got excited. He was such a simpleton. Monica took possession of him and then fell asleep. They left the conversation for later. Ty and Anne, meanwhile, were discussing the past weekend on Sunday evening. Anne wasn't sure if she should tell Ty about her dominance over Tim. Ty wasn't sure if he should tell Anne about his dominance over Monica, if it really was dominance. To some extent, he felt that he himself was being dominated. Still, it was fun. He decided to tell Anne, and did so. He described most of what he did to Monica. They fell asleep on this. They haven't fully discussed the possibility that one of them could dominate the other, now that such things are open and available for discussion. There was very little communication between the two couples for 2 weeks. When Monica suggested another weekend swap with Ty and Anne, Tim reluctantly agreed. The four met at Tim's house late in the afternoon. Tim carefully prepared for the evening. Ty and Monica were a couple, and so were Anne and Tim. Tim and Anne left. Meanwhile, Anne and Tim returned to her house. Tim poured her some white wine, and they started kissing. Anne ordered Tim to take off his clothes, and of course he obeyed. They had a great time. She fell asleep. It was a very deep sleep. He specifically checked. Tim dressed in a dark tracksuit and a black baseball cap. He had 2 syringes in a small fanny pack. He left Anne's house through the basement, leaving the door open. He ran to his house. He quietly entered through the back door. He sniffed the air and listened carefully. The house was dark, and there were no sounds. Tim looked around the kitchen. He noticed 2 empty beer bottles on the counter. The red wine bottle was just below the level it was at when he set it up. Satisfied, he silently walked up the stairs. He knew how to do it without making a single noise. He was training. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Tim stopped to the side and listened again. He heard the sounds of deep breathing. He carefully pushed the door and entered the room. He took the syringes out of his fanny pack. Ty and Monica were fast asleep. Tim felt satisfied. This was his first attempt in this matter. There was a feeling of pride. He stood over Ty with a syringe in his hand. He was about to give an injection to his right shoulder. He looked at Monica. She seemed so peaceful sleeping there. The second syringe was for her. It was meant to look like an accidental overdose of inexperienced people tampering with something they didn't understand. Death by accident. He tapped the first syringe. He approached Ty. He looked at Monica again. It had to be both for the accident story to work. Once he injects Ty, it will be inevitable for Monica to die. And he couldn't. Uber almost shouted at him about what a bastard Tyu was. But Tim knew Ty wasn't a creep. Don was a bastard, and he paid for it. You shouldn't have killed your one true love, even if she wasn't that loyal. If Ty was an asshole. Well, Tim placed the first syringe on Ty's stomach and the second on Monica's thigh. He took a photo of them with syringes. He then took the syringes and left the bedroom. He returned to the kitchen. He carefully washed the beer bottles and removed the caps, which had been resealed, from the rack. He poured the remaining red wine into the sink and rinsed it too. He left all the glass bottles outside in a recycling bin. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when Tim returned to Anne. He cleaned up the kitchen a little and went to bed where Anne was sleeping. It took him a long time to fall asleep, but eventually he fell asleep. He woke up early and Anne was still sleeping. He prepared bacon, eggs, and coffee. He woke her up with a kiss. She was a little lethargic, but the smell of bacon and coffee brought her to her senses. Anne was a little uneasy when she ate breakfast, but the food cheered her up, especially coffee. Tim made her another cup. Now he served her like a naked butler. She smiled at him. She said, "An obedient stud who can cook. You're perfect, Tim." He smiled at her. "What are we going to do today, Anne? I am, of course, completely at your disposal." They had a nice walk, and then Anne took Tim back to her place and to bed. She decided to make love to him rather than dominate him. It was already late when they finished. Tim said, "Anne, you know I'm really falling in love with you. Maybe you are too." "Yes, you know I do too. But I also love Ty, and you love Monica. What should I do?" Tim said, "I have a dark side, Anne, and I was close to breaking down. I need to go away for a while. I'm going on something like a walk, but with a vehicle. I'm not talking about this to anyone except you, especially not Monica." "What do you want me to tell her?" "Nothing. I'll decide this myself. Someday I'll come back. Then we'll see." They cooked dinner together, both dressed. We ate like a married couple. Tim was happy. When they left for the evening, they made love again. And when they woke up in the morning, Tim tore Anne to pieces. She was delighted with this. But Tim left after lunch. Tim had a bag that he kept within reach for emergencies. There was cash, a bank card for an account he had had for some time. He took this bag and went to a motorcycle repair shop. He agreed with the guy to buy a bike. It was a big bike with luggage bags. He also bought a set of clothes and a helmet. He left and drove all night. In the morning, he was already far away and had breakfast at a diner. He again drove further, generally to the west. Stopped for the night at a roadside hotel. Paid in cash. Slept really well. The next day, he turned on his phone, which was turned off. He borrowed a computer from the guy in the next room. He sent Ty a photo of Ty and Monica and the syringes. Then he continued on his way. Anne showed up at Monica's house on Sunday afternoon, without Tim, of course. She told them that Tim left on Saturday and that she had no idea when he would be back. Monica was shocked. But her calls to Tim's cell phone went straight to voicemail. She looked at Ty. "What happened? I thought he was fine." Ty said, "You know him better than anyone." They had a low-key dinner, and Ty drove Anne home. Monica held it in until dinner. When they left, she cried for almost an hour. She thought, really believed, that she might never see Tim again. She believed that her submission to Ty had a profound effect on Tim. She also thought she had ruined their marriage from the moment she slept with Don. She hardly slept. Her calls were not answered. On Monday, she took the day off and just sat at home. By dinner time, she reluctantly called her children. None of them had heard of Tim. She had to explain to them that Tim had been having problems lately. She returned to work on Tuesday. Meanwhile, Ty opened his personal email on Monday evening and saw a strange email from an unknown sender. There was a photograph there. He opened it. He almost fainted. It was a feeling he had never experienced before. Coldness, numbness, accompanied by absolute fear. He sat down on the sofa. Anne noticed. Ty? What happened? Ty? Don't push me, Anne. I need to think. I'll go for a walk. Please trust me for now. Ty walked for an hour and a half. Eventually, he returned home. He wasn't going to show Anne's photo. Or Monica, he thought. But he needed to say something. He asked Anne to invite Monica to dinner on Tuesday to discuss Tim's sudden departure. Then they went to bed. But Ty hardly slept. Syringes. He knew for a fact that the syringes were lethal, and that he and Monica had narrowly escaped injection somehow. He also knew what Tim wanted to convey with this message. Loud and clear, stay away from Monica, or else. At Tuesday's dinner, Ty spoke with the women about how to proceed. Over lasagna and wine, he said, "As you both know, I believe Tim killed your lawyer, Don. There's a rage in him. I know it was a long time ago, and he seemed fine. But now he's not there." And said, "We had a great time on the weekend before he left. He was loving and sad. It's sad, really." Monica said, We should never have done this exchange. I told Tim how Ty and I were. We shouldn't have done that." Ty asked Monica, "Do you think he'll come back? And if he does, are any of us in danger?" Monica looked at Ty. She wasn't stupid. She said, "You know something, Ty. You know more than you're saying." Ty showed a printout of a photo with syringes. He placed it on the coffee table. Monica gasped. Anne was less impressed, more puzzled. Monica started crying. Anne looked at Ty. She then hugged Monica and let her cry. Finally, Anne asked, "Tell me about this photograph." Ty said, "Tim was here. The last time we exchanged. The syringes were probably filled with some powerful drug that would have killed us, and it would have looked like we overdosed." Anne said, "Jesus, oh." Monica stopped crying, but she sat staring into space. Ty said, "It was sent to me. He was trying to, maybe save me, told me to stay away." Anne looked at Ty. How could he do this? Ty muttered, "He's a fucking genius. That's how it is. If he wanted to kill me or anyone, he could do it and never get caught. It's scary." Monica coughed. "He could have killed us both, but here we are. We were lucky." Monica said, "No, he couldn't do it. Or maybe he just wanted a photo." Ty looked at her. His heart changed. The syringes were real. "You know, if he killed me, he would have had to kill you too. So I believe the syringes were real, but he couldn't do it, at least not for you. Maybe, I don't know." Anne and Ty left. Monica kept a copy of the photo, but hid it. She wanted to leave it as a reminder in case Tim returned. She wasn't sure what kind of reminder, because if they stay married, she definitely won't cheat. Monica and Anne continued to communicate and were friends in a strange way, but not Ty. From the time he left her house after showing the photos, they never saw each other or spoke again. Anne told Monica about Ty's moods and activities. Tim was gone for 50 days. He just wandered around, looked at things, thought about life, and met people. He only killed one person. It's a long story. But this man was a major scoundrel, and the world is better without him. Tim rode his motorcycle up to his house for dinner on Thursday. Monica was home alone, as she had been for quite some time. She hasn't dated anyone or gone out since Tim left. She just worked. People at work knew Tim had left, although she didn't know how they knew. This meant that men were trying to make advances on her for several weeks after his disappearance. But she was so determined in her refusals that it stopped. So when she heard a motorcycle in the driveway, she thought one of those men was trying to get her again. But Tim rang the doorbell. She answered. She took a few steps back. Then she threw herself on his neck. Tim picked it up. He said, "I'm back, and I'm not that bad." She kissed him, crying, "I'm so happy, Timmy." He carried her into the house and straight upstairs to the bedroom. It was 9 when they went downstairs to eat. Monica ate frozen meals, and that was their dinner. Burrito and beans. No amount of gas could bother them that night. But they talked after eating. Monica asked, "Where did you go? And why?" "I bought a motorcycle, it's outside, and I was just wandering around on it. I was so confused and unstable when I left. We need to get to the bottom of this." Ty showed Anne and me a photo. I was so scared. "Are you afraid now?" "A little. Since you left, I haven't been with Ty or anyone else. What about you?" "No." "Can we start over then? Me and you. Just us." "I hope so, Monica. Can you?" "Yeah, I'm pretty sure." "You don't feel limited by my inclinations. Perhaps your loyalty to me, if there is any, only comes out of fear. When I was with Dawn, I was really afraid of what would happen if you found out. Divorce, but I thought you wouldn't leave me." "You were right. I didn't leave." "But Tim, other things happened." "Yes. Now, with Ty, you allowed it to be with Anne, maybe. But you allowed it. And then this photo. I allowed the exchange. But what happened between you and Ty was too much for me. You were the lowest in the hierarchy. Anne and I owned you. Ty owned me. Maybe he could own Anne if he tried. Maybe you thought he could own you too. It occurred to me that I might obey." "Do you want to obey, Tim? Do you want him to own you? Own all of us?" "If that happened, I would probably end up reacting badly, so I sent him a photo. Whatever I want, there's a part of me that won't tolerate it. And Monica, that part of me is ruthless. So, where are we going? Anne is my friend. I still want her to be my friend, even if you have a crush on her. But she's with Ty." "Yes, and I'm sure Ty won't want to come near me or you. We can discuss this with them. I can invite them to dinner tomorrow and explain that it's just for conversation. Okay? I don't hate Ty. I like him. He's pretty insightful. You know, they might not come to dinner." But they came. Ty and Anne arrived at 6:30. Monica met them at the door. Both were nervous. Tim was in the backyard grilling meat, burgers, corn. He turned as the three walked out onto the terrace. "Hi, as you can see, I'm back. I wanted to apologize to Ty. For the photo, I mean." Tim extended his hand for a handshake, and Ty accepted it. They looked at each other for a while. Tim smiled. Ty nodded, and the moment passed. Tim got Ty a beer. He let Ty open it himself, simply handing him the opener. Ty hesitated a bit. But he was thirsty, and he opened the bottle. He took a sip and set it down. He thought that if he felt unwell soon, he would still be able to function. And if not, he can have a beer. He ended up drinking a beer and another. Despite the apparent reconciliation between the two men, there was a lot of tension on the terrace. They ate on the street. Monica and Anne chatted, while Tim and Ty mostly listened. Women also drank red wine. Tim served dessert banana bread from the bakery. When the meal was finished, Tim said, "Okay, I want to open up the discussion. You know, about all this crap that happened." Ty said, "Were you going to kill us?" "Yes, that was the plan." "What stopped you?" "Two things. I would have had to kill Monica if I had killed you. I just couldn't do it right then. But here's the thing, Ty. You're alive because you're not a bastard. You didn't do anything to deserve death." Anne said, "Could you too? I don't know. B." Monica said, "Friendly." Tim said, "Of course. But I don't think we should have sex like we used to." He looked at Anne, at her hand. "I see you're engaged." Anne raised her hand. Yes, we are engaged." Ty said, And Tim, when I proposed, I made it clear that our relationship would be exclusive. No more Tim. No more Monica for me. That's a condition. Tim said, okay. He turned to Anne, looked her straight in the eyes, took her hand. I fell in love with you. I won't try anything, but I thought everyone here should know. It wasn't just lust. Anne began to cry quietly. She said, I know, Tim, and maybe I do too, but it can't happen. Ty said, Monica and I weren't in love. We got really carried away, really. Monica said, but that's all in the past. Tim has weaknesses that are incompatible with continuation. They had a good time and agreed to do it again, platonic communication, that is. As Monica closed the door behind Anne and Ty, she watched Tim clean up after dinner. She was filled with a certain desire. When he finished, she said, Timmy, just because you can't be Ty's slave. Well, that doesn't mean you can't be a slave. I want you to be my slave. It makes me so horny. So, take off your clothes. Tim was confused for a moment, but he obeyed, and he crawled towards her when she ordered him to do so. In fact, he obeyed her every command all night. He realized that there is nothing more exciting than submission. From that point on, the power relationship in the marriage became completely one-sided. Monica got what she wanted, when she wanted it, as long as it was between the two of them. She knew better than to bring up the topic of sex with other people. Tim found that he never got tired of playing the submissive husband. Both of them have aged, but their dynamic has not. Anne immediately realized that Monica had taken possession of Tim again, but she never talked about it with her husband. Anne and Ty had 2 children and lived a good life. But when Ty and Anne came to Tim and Monica's house, Anne was always excited, remembering how she had Tim under her control. She could never do this to Ty the way Monica did to Tim. But sometimes, when Anne and Tim were alone for a moment, Anne would throw an order at Tim. Nothing sexy, maybe get her a drink. Tim always obeyed Anne even then. He was such a simpleton, to a certain degree. Tim never killed Ty or Monica. They both behaved. He met several complete scoundrels who did great evil. What's the point of having talent if you don't use it? Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.